If you're enjoying the Heath Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This edition of our podcast is brought to you by 360 Health and Well Balanced Nutrition.
Welcome to the Heath Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hey everybody, got a quick question for you. When's the last time you had goosebumps? Not because you were cold, because you felt something.
Last Wednesday.
Tell me about it.
I was in New York City. I was seeing Wicked, the musical, at the Gershwin Theater. It's home. And I always get emotional in that. It's my favorite musical. And during the climax, I guess, of the first act is Defying Gravity, the song Defying Gravity. And to hear it is awesome as well, but to see it when Elphaba is actually flying and singing these notes, I cried. And I'm starting to get goosebumps now just thinking about it because it was an amazing experience.
So you said it. You thought it was awesome.
It was awesome.
And we're talking about the book Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life by Dacher Keltner.
Can I tell you mine?
Please.
Because, I had to open up this book to read it, and then I thought, it's 9/11. I need to maybe put my American flag out. So it was about 10 in the morning, so I thought, I'll take my little American flag out there and hang it on the thing. I walk out there, and there's a deer standing right 10 feet away from me. And I thought, it's going to move. And so I started talking to it, and then I walked over to my steps, which took me away from the deer, and then down to my sidewalk, and I kept walking up to this deer, and there's this chewing its cud. And I was like, this is so wow. It was like, this is cool. And it was
a wow moment.
It was, wow. So
nice.
How about you?
I don't have a cool story like that to share, but I do have what brought me to this book is, back in February of last year, we read Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart.
Yes, I do remember.
And all of these, the language of the human experience and these emotions, and awe is one that stood out to me from that. And then I go browsing Bookmarks, a really cool local bookstore, and this cover stands out to me. I have the hardcover, and it's this beautiful, green and blue starry sky. And I'm like, ooh, and so I picked it up and I suggested it as part of this book. And then I didn't realize how this author was also he's a professor, but he's the man behind Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center that I listen to lots of their podcasts. So it just
wasn't he on the background of the Pixar movie Inside Out or whatever?
Yeah, so he was kind of a consultant on that movie, which is super cool. I loved that one.
Yeah, he is a professor of psychology at the University of California, Berkeley, and as I was reading this is just a California hippie.
He is. He was raised by hippies, it sounds like.
Yeah. And unfortunately, his beloved brother has died, and I felt this was a tribute to him processing all that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it was his personal. He needed to write this to confront that loss. Yeah.
Well, he is a professor of psychology at UC Berkeley. He's the son of artists, but also has this science-based approach. Right, so he has this upbringing that appreciates art and then somehow ties science into awe. And for me, it was a lot of stories about the really cool things that happen in our lives. And it brought me back. The cool thing about the book club is that all of these books just tie together and remind me of other things. So awe really, to me, summed up the importance of some of the other books we've read, like putting your phone away, getting out in nature, and having fun, because when we do that, we can experience more awe.
Yeah, forest bathing, and the book Fun that we read. And it seems like there was another one that, how to break up with your smartphone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is also a thick book.
Has a nice thick bibliography though that is printed in the book, and it is I wanted to see footnotes in the book. I felt that would have helped me because I didn't go back and connect some of the notes that he has in his footnote or credit area, but it's there. So I did feel good about that because I was thinking, has this got any substance to it? And yeah, it does. He's done his research.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I know you usually do this, but you didn't. Alan Lane.
Oh, good.
He was the founder of Penguin Books.
Oh.
And this was his own imprint that was for hardback. Alan Lane is now the leading publisher in the UK of best-selling serious nonfiction, setting the agenda in subjects including history, science, politics, economics, philosophy, psychology, language, and current
That
affairs.
sounds good.
So,
And this is a 2023 book,
yeah.
hot off the press.
Yep. So it is Penguin.
Random House UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alan Lane. Okay, good. And he was the founder.
Of Penguin, yeah.
Okay, good to know.
I have the physical book in front of me, but I listened through Audible, and he narrates it,
Oh.
which I love just hearing the author read it to me.
Yeah, that's like they're sitting in the chair next to you, and I like that too.
Yeah.
And I listened to some of his YouTubes, and he does have a nice manner and conversation and very thoughtful. I mean, he has a nice way about him.
Yeah, and
As this
you
book
feel
does,
like you can
yeah.
get to know his personality.
Well, just what is awe? Do we know?
Yeah. What's the definition? Did
Because
you
we
write it
just
down?
told you we felt it, and I have frequent encounters with awe, and particularly this summer, the sky has been awesome. That rich blue and those big white puffy clouds that we've seen before all these storms, and I just stop. I'll be walking to my car in a parking lot, and I will stop and go, "Wow, look at that!" And so this is the transformative power of everyday wonder. And I think that's what he's trying to encourage us in saying, let's focus on this a minute because there could be some health benefits to us. And so as he's going over the science of awe, he also shares stories, and then he talks about the cultural relevance of awe and how that's connected, but then how to seek it and grow from experiencing awe.
He says, how does awe transform us? By quieting the nagging, self-critical, overbearing, status-conscious voice of ourself, our ego, and empowering us to collaborate, to open our minds to wonders, and to see the deep patterns of life. And that just says it all right there, because as we get into life, that nagging, self-critical voice, it is strong, and
That's that Chatter story. We read that book
that's
too.
chatter. Yeah. So,
Well, he also says that being amazed at things outside of ourselves, it's the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world, the mysterious, the encounter with the divine or sublime, And I think that's close
yeah.
to defining what it might be.
You mentioned his brother, and he does start off the book
Rolf.
talking about Rolf and his last day, and then their connection that they had. And he said a loud voice called out, "Find awe." And so he weaved that story in throughout this book, and I just appreciated that personal part of it, and knowing what was inspiring him to find that. So that was neat. And he also is very divergent? No, what's the word? I don't know. I just liked how he admitted in the beginning that he's a very anxious person and even got himself kicked out of a meditation class.
Yeah.
Apparently, they were supposed to be chanting, "I am a purple being of fire," and
He just said
he couldn't really
started
relate
laughing.
to that. Yeah, I don't blame him.
No. He asked the question if awe can change your life, and what you were just talking about, his anxiety. Apparently, after awe, it does make you feel better. After you have that thing, it's not permanent. It's a temporary state, and it dissipates. But PTSD, people seem to have fewer episodes after this, and depression seems to be reduced. So I think even if there's some long-term effects of it, even a year out. And I think, wow, then we do need to stop and let ourselves see it, participate in it. And it doesn't have to be a big thing.
No, it's everyday, ordinary things that we can experience awe through. And I think I brought it up in another podcast, but there's a book that Catherine Price talked about. Oh, I can't remember the author, but it was a poet, and he talked about all the things that delighted him. And that reminded me a lot of these stories that we're hearing, that these are just everyday, ordinary moments that if we can just be there and connect to them, that we can experience more awe and have the benefits of those things.
And I do think it requires us to slow down a little bit.
It does.
Which, as I mentioned in another conversation, we just live so fast. Pack our days with too much.
I can relate to that right now. I was telling Tim when I got here that life feels really busy right now. I think I have more on my plate than I'd like to, and I'm trying to juggle that. And that's why I don't have a story of awe to share. So it can happen. We just can get too much going on, and we got to slow down.
Yeah. They also say that awe can be protective against chronic inflammation.
Which is a super
Yeah, that would be good. wouldn't it?
interesting fact, yeah.
So how do you know that you're experiencing awe? He had some ideas about that. And this thing called a vocal burst. I loved it. Like, whoa! Wow. Yeah, and they've done recordings of this, and they've played it in other languages, and people can determine from the sound, that vocal burst, that that person was experiencing awe. So it's a universal sound. And he even said animals can pick up on it. And he said Jane Goodall watched these chimpanzees at a waterfall do this dance, and it was like, are they in an awe moment? It appeared that they were to her. So evolutionarily, he's suggesting that awe is programmed in us for a good reason. It has benefits to us if we can experience it. Did you catch on to his 8 wonders of life?
Yeah, I was just trying to find a good reference to that because I didn't take good notes, but I wanted to discuss that.
Yeah, he said that awe triggers the 8 wonders of life. At least that's the way I understood it. Or they're the 8 sources of awe that we can draw on. And I'll just read the list, and then maybe we can talk about 1 or 2 of them. Moral beauty, collective effervescence, nature, which I think many people would say, oh yeah, I've had an awe experience in nature. Music, which is what Tim just said. Visual design, spiritual and religious stories, then watching a birth or watching a death or participating in that often generates an awe moment. And then an epiphany, a big idea. It's like, whoa! And I like those. I
Me
like
too.
epiphanies. But that was I'm not sure I knew what to make of this book as I was going through it. I don't know, so it's okay. But that list of stuff was a list I've never seen.
Yeah.
That was an unusual collection of things.
Well, for this book, he gathered stories of awe from people in 26 countries. This was interesting. They made sure that they had a variety of people's stories and not just what they called weird samples. And so weird stood for Western, educated, individualist, rich, and democratic.
Yep.
So the participants were anything but weird. Participants included all major religions from Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Judaism.
Judaism.
Thank you. So they varied in terms of their wealth and their education. They lived within democratic and authoritarian political systems. They held different kinds of jobs, and they ranged in their cultural values. So just a neat thing to point out that this isn't just a collection of weird stories.
No, it's not. I talked to my neighbor about moral beauty yesterday. We had a really good conversation on the way to the automotive repair shop because his car was in need. But he says the most common trigger for awe is this moral beauty. And I had trouble understanding, what is moral beauty? I don't get it. I think I understand it better now. He's talking about the acts of kindness that we do to each other that comes from a moral center. And that if you watch somebody do something kind to someone else, you can have an awe experience. You know, it just takes your breath away. Like, wow, they just did that. Mm-hmm. What did you understand the moral beauty differently, or is that
not differently? And he did say that is one of the main things.
It's the most common.
Ways. Yeah,
the most common.
Because we watch someone run into a burning building to save a life, and we're like, oh my gosh. Uh-huh. So those kinds of things, but I had never heard or thought of that term, moral beauty.
No, it was kind of a new. I think that's what he's saying in this book. Nobody's written about awe before. We talk about sadness and all these other emotions, gratitude, those sorts of things. But this seems to be a kind of a new topic. Mm-hmm. Or a new focus, anyway. The collective effervescence is one of my favorite ones. It's that idea of moving in a unison. We see it in sports. You know, you go to an athletic thing and the wave happens. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's something like 20 seats every 20 seconds or something. They've measured the rate of that. But all of a sudden, you're collectively doing things with strangers.
Yeah.
And it feels good. Dances that we've watched. Then I thought about protest marches, marching, military marching. There are all sorts of things that we do collectively that generate an emotional response that could be called awe.
I think dancing has been part of so many cultures for such a long time, but dancing to me always brings about awe, or watching people dance to music and the emotion that comes from it. It just always attracts me.
Yeah, he talked about the mosh pits that he and his brother used to go to, on drugs. and he does talk about psychedelics in here as well. But that idea of just letting loose. And he has a story of some financial advisor lady who was very uptight, and she all of a sudden gets into one of these, Daybreaker. Burning Man. That was another one, the Burning Man and the Daybreaker groups, where you go and there's no money exchanged. And did you know anything about Burning Man? Because they had in this rainstorm, they got trapped out there. And when you were in New York, they were in Burning Man.
Yeah, actually, before I left, because they were talking about it the morning we left, I was watching it on TV. They were finally getting to come out after like 4 extra days. I'm like, yeah,
and
I
you
get
were
it.
complaining about 2 days.
Yeah. But it was...
it's a collective experience, and I'm not really that familiar with Burning Man, but evidently you go and you trade, you give food to people, you shelter with each other, and then anyway, so she did this daybreak thing that was at 9 in the morning, and it was a similar gathering, but rode her bike out to the edge and had a communal experience, just awe-generating, evidently. But she started dancing. She just let her body, and he says, move our bodies the way they were meant to move. Mm-hmm. And he repeats that sentence several times in his thing. So that he's suggesting if we do that together, we actually become one collective organism. In that movement together. We're no longer individuals. We leave ourselves, and that's what is the mysterious, awesome vastness of awe.
Yeah, this one was a little besides dancing, it was a little out there for me because he would reference like watching school children line up to go out to recess was a moment of this collective that they're all moving together. And I'm just like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
sure. But okay, what is the next one?
Nature.
Nature. Oh, well, you know how we feel about nature.
Yeah,
and
forest bathing. Yeah. Just go engage. Sit down, don't walk. Did you read about the awe walk? Which I think kind of combines the moving and the nature thing. It's the walk. You witness, accept, love, and know thyself. So that when you're walking, take your time to witness what you're seeing. You know.
Is that similar to forest bathing? Do you think?
I thought so. It's just a
kind
different
of like
way
a
to.
walking meditation and forest bathing combined.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But he says take an awe walk. And that WALK stands for those things. I was sitting in the parking lot yesterday. I was in the car a lot yesterday, but I was watching, I was witnessing these two women take a walk. And all of a sudden I noticed their legs were totally in unison.
sync.
Yeah. And they made a loop. They were pushing, one of them was pushing a baby carriage. And I thought, well, that there you go. They are in together, in motion, experiencing something.
Yeah. You know,
It was awesome to me, maybe not to them. So that might have been moral beauty,
That's true.
if I have to label it.
This time of year, the leaves are falling, and when I go out and walk, I'll just like follow a leaf as it flows right to the left down to the ground. I'm like, it just takes my attention for that long, and it's something so simple. But I guess that would be a moment of awe.
It might be. Do you have chill bumps?
No, I don't get chill bumps from it.
Well, on the science of it, they do talk about the piloerection, the little muscles around your hair cells, and they talk about something called ASMR, which I did not know about.
Oh, God.
Autonomous sensory meridian response, and the body electric, which, you know, we in another book we read, we were talking about the food we are the, what is it, the food we ate? What your food ate, yeah. And there we talked about body wisdom, but here he's talking about body electric, that chill you get up your spine, which is kind of another fun thing to think about. But if you go on YouTube, there are a bunch of videos of he knows what I'm talking about.
This is a trend right now, yeah.
I had no clue about this, so I went out to look, and I went, "Oh, this is strange."
Yeah.
But these people talk really quietly, and then
And they start, yeah. And I understand that really helps people. Some people
Go
can't
to
sleep
sleep.
without it and stuff. But it doesn't do anything for me. And I'm just like, I can't hear you. Because I can't hear crap anyway. So I'm like, what are you saying? I can read lips usually, but I'm like,
Is that what they do?
yeah, you've got to check it out. I mean, you have to check it
I
out.
see it on Instagram, and you know I'm into organizing, and so I get these organizing reels, and these gals with fake nails, and they,
Oh, yeah, and
they
they-
pull out their whatever they got from Amazon, and they're like,
yeah. 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 Yeah.
you're just like, okay, come on with it.
There are some places like they do massage and stuff like that, but they
Oh, they play that in the background?
no that is the ASMR part because they have shotgun mics, these long microphones that pick up. They're made for overhead stuff, and as they're doing the massage, the sound of the fingers over the skin. Stuff like that. And I'm like, I like watching the massage part because I just like that.
Yeah.
But
So it's not
what
working
is
for
it
you.
doing? I'm not getting the response. Maybe the response that I'm getting is negative
Maybe.
response.
Maybe you don't need that, so it's not working for you.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And I support it and I'm all for it, but I don't get it.
Well, I'm there in the same ball court with you because it was like news to me, and I thought, interesting. So anyway, enough of that. So that I brought that up just because I thought it would be fun.
Yeah. No,
So what about visual design?
oh yeah, that was interesting.
Have you seen a painting that you just were floored by, or a sculpture, or I think that's what he was talking about, wasn't he?
Sacred geometries.
Yeah.
Visual art also documents geometries of our social lives, the symmetries of love between parent and child, and yeah, I don't know. This is where it got a little bit up in the clouds for me.
Well, then when you get to the spiritual and religious stories, that really has dominated the writings of awe. He said when he went to do the research, most of the awe descriptions are in the spiritual, theological body of work, because that is the whole conversation about soul. You know, what is your soul? Mm-hmm. And that comes into his conversation as well. And it's not an easy question to answer.
Well, I think it is important that he wrote this book to include other areas of awe, not just based on religion.
Well, definitely life and death. Anybody that has witnessed a birth, if they have not been awestruck, is unusual. And anybody that's been with someone when they're dying is another. And he speaks of his brother's journey. Because he was with them, I think, or there soon after. I can't remember.
I think he was with them.
Yeah.
It seemed like a planned moment.
Yes, it was. He made a decision.
He was
Cancer
suffering
death.
from colon cancer. Yeah. Well, I recently met a retired pastor, and he was telling me that some of the greatest moments of being a pastor were with people in their final moments at the hospital. And maybe, you know, his role is often when they don't have other people necessarily there for them. And they tend to open up and share their life stories, and they're no longer guarded, so they can just be completely vulnerable. And he was just like that. It's
Whoa.
a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
So I wasn't reading this when he heard that story, so it was neat to then read this and be like, oh yeah, that was a moment of awe. Like, he experiences that over and over, and no wonder that that's one of his major parts of being a pastor that he enjoyed. Because at first it was a little weird to me.
And whenever you meet people who make that their career, and you think, why would you choose that? And then they tell you all these wonderful things that have happened for them because of that choice. But it takes special people.
It does.
It does.
I have a friend who is training. I think she finished her training to become a death doula.
Hey, I have a friend that has done that too.
Oh, that's a new term for me.
Yeah.
So it's
Is she in Oregon because that's where it's legal?
no. She's here.
Oh, is it legal here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're not like helping them die.
Hey, well,
but
my friend does.
No. This is just
They have the
spiritual and
concoction.
emotional help to physical comfort and logistical assistance and stuff like that. But yeah,
Not the Kevorkian thing.
no, not death assistance.
Yeah.
Just the
journey.
doulas provide support
Yeah.
during
Like childbirth. They're doulas for childbirth too.
life-changing transitions. So, yeah.
Well, and there were stories of birth, and a story of a grandma experiencing her first grandchild being born, and how another thing that took me back to other books is how we're living long enough for that to happen, and for that wisdom to be passed down, and for that experience. And I was just trying to visualize or to fathom what that would feel like, because
That's good.
as a mom, you've gone through that experience, but how it would be different watching your children have children. It's definitely a big transitional part of life that not always was something people were able to witness, I guess.
Yeah. The physiological thing here, he says, is if you experience awe, it's the antithesis to the social threat response. And what it's doing is it's causing the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines when you're under a social threat. And the awe network shuts that down, so that we have this thing called the default mode network that is monitoring me. You know, how am I doing? Am I going to survive? You know, my ego, my self structure. And when I'm experiencing awe, it shuts that network down in our brain. They've done MRI light up studies to see which areas in your brain are active. And so there is a difference in what's going on in your head and your vagus nerve and all that kind of stuff too.
That's a really neat part to bring up.
Yeah, and so that's what I think he's saying. If we can seek or allow ourselves to experience this, there are health benefits that have long-lasting ramifications, and we should take advantage of that.
Because connection is part of that, right? And awe is bringing us as a connective group back to that reality and away from it's all about me.
Right, and that this is good for us because we're programmed to be kind, and societies could be kind. We're not really necessarily warrior states all the time, and we don't have to be that way. And it brings the best out in us to experience awe. It does bring that generosity out. But at the end of his story, he talks about if you experience awe, you're more open to experiencing it again. And so it kind of compounds on itself, and it allows us to see those things that you talked about, the systems underpinning the wonders of life. And so that idea of social systems, or the systems, and system thinking, I think is one of the last chapters he talked about, which surprised me, caught me off guard. I thought, oh, now we're talking about systems. But that system thinking gets back to my little wonderful world of ecology. And you were mentioning in one of our conversations earlier about indigenous knowledge, indigenous people. And so there's this TEK, which TEK stands for Traditional Ecological Knowledge, which is the interdependent nature of us. We are not alone. We are connected to everything in this living in the world. So that kind of is a hippie thought. Let's get some flowers and dance and love each other, which is not bad advice.
No. Well, and I looked on the website for the Greater Good Science Center.
Yeah.
And they've got this little section related to awe and all kinds of articles and such. And the one on the top that caught my eye is children are kinder when they experience awe. And I don't remember if it was an interview that I read or if it was actually in this book, but an interview that I listened to. But they were bringing up how our kids are raised, they aren't experiencing as much awe, which makes sense. They're not outside as much, and
screen time.
They may be more
perfectionist,
sheltered or indoors or working on academics.
And you've got to be perfect. And that struggle that they have, there's a book called The Last Child in the Woods that this also made me think of when he started talking about kids, because that fellow wrote the book maybe 15, 20 years ago, saying we're not helping our children by isolating them from nature, which would get back to that traditional ecological knowledge of the indigenous experience, where you know what soils are like, you've touched them, you've been in them, you've seen all the different life forms around you, rather than avoiding them because they're ugly and scary.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting. I'm going, if
you
nothing else, I'm going to be paying attention to, everyday, ordinary moments that I might be able to appreciate more and find awe in.
I like that.
I don't know that I recommend this book to read. I don't know.
It was a little tedious for me to read, and I do like what we've talked about here. I mean, it actually provoked a good conversation.
Exactly, yeah.
But there may be other ways for our folks to get to this, unless you're seriously wanting that journey in detail.
Yeah, well, if you're listening to this, so you like podcasts, I would recommend some of the podcasts from the Greater Good Science Center. There's a Happiness Break.
Oh.
And The Science of Happiness, which are both awesome. And then, like I said, there's some fun reads on their website. So still, I encourage you to explore the topic, even if you don't read this book. But
I will give him credit. I mean, he has written a focused book on something that you wouldn't necessarily have thought about.
Yeah.
I have a question. So I may have just missed this if you mentioned it, but
you sleep at the wheel over there?
Are we putting maybe too much emphasis or making what our conception of awe is too powerful, that even the small things in life can be awesome.
We agree with you, yes. And we did make a comment about it doesn't have to be a big event to create awe.
Because when you said, Kristen, that you're going to pay attention more to things like that, and it could be that you get awed
Yes.
every day, that you just is, but it's not. Wow.
Right.
It's not shouted out loud awe. So
And it's that openness to it. You know,
Yeah.
once you experience it, like you've just had a kind of a big experience, you're more open now at the theater with Wizard.
Yeah.
Or,
Wicked.
Wicked, yeah. So you're very open and you're going to experience more of it. So that get started on the journey would be the trick too, is to.
Right, and as you mentioned, slowing down. And it reminds me a lot of Catherine Price's advice and just playing more and living life and having fun. There's a lot of parallels there, I think.
Right. Yeah, and then you do some of these things. You get out in nature, you hear music, or you collectively move, and that's going to trigger the awe.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's things, and just being kind,
yeah.
taking the opportunity to be kind.
And noticing other people and their kind. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about the psychedelics.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, he knows a lot of interesting people. That is one thing.
Yeah.
That was cool about this book. From collaborating on the movie Inside Out to
Which was a good movie.
people who he's done psychedelics with.
Yeah. Yeah, and the research on that psychedelic stuff was about the bad trip and the good trips. And the bad trips are not as big in number as the good trips are. And that it lets someone experience that just vanishing from themselves. I've never done it, so I don't have an idea of what that would be like. Maybe I should go try that.
Well, there were some interesting stories in here about what do they call them, where you're out of body experience, where you're in the hospital and you feel like you're above yourself, seeing everything go on. The stories are mind blowing to me.
Yeah, I have had that happen. Did you have that happen with your chest thing? Any out of body?
no, I didn't have any of that. Everything was. It's hard to explain. It was very routine. Everything was like, yeah. I was more aware of my heart beating because, I had that fixed. And I was told up front that you will become more aware of it because, it was having so much trouble. And so it was just, I'm awake and I'm doing all this other stuff. But I remember laying to the side because I wasn't able to lay down at first. And just feeling my chest go, I'm like, wow.
There you go.
That is straight. That is strange, but it wasn't. I mean, I was just watching TV, so but it was a small thing. But I guess you could be yeah.
Just one other thing about the religious thing and the vocal bursts. The idea of when you say, "Whoa," there's something in that "whoa" that has been incorporated into some of these chants in these religious sects. Tapping into that sound. That vibration, and the om of the yogis. Yeah. So this is I'm glad we read it, and I hope that you all have enjoyed our conversation. I'm Eleanor at 360 Health, making healthy happen for you, and I hope that you have an awesome time until we get together again. You can find me at 360health4u.com.
And I am Kristen Norton. I'm a registered dietitian, part of Well Balanced Nutrition. You can find us at wellbalancednutrition.com and learn about our nutrition coaching and other offers that we have. I'm going to end this podcast with a quote. The epiphany of awe is that its experience connects our individual selves with the vast forces of life. In awe, we understand we are part of many things that are much larger than the self.
Shamalama ding dong.
The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.